the biggest thing for me at the end of the day, and I've always said this, if I could never horse show again, I would be fine with it, because I do this because I love the horses. Like, I think the sport is a great part of it, but if all I could do was ride at home every day and make horses better and have that relationship with them, like, I would be so happy doing that. And I think that they know that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I spend a lot of time back in the barn. I've always been very hands-on, especially after grooming. And I think that having that sort of personal relationship with them means that when I ask for things from them in the ring, they're willing to give me that little bit extra. I think at the end of the day, it should be a partnership more than anything else.
Welcome to the Practical Horseman podcast, featuring conversations with respected riders, industry leaders, and horse care experts. The show is co-hosted by Practical Horseman editors, and our goal is to inform, educate, and inspire. I'm Julia Murphy, and this week's episode is with top show jumper Mavis Spencer. I caught up with Mavis at the 2022 Devon Horse Show and Country Fair, where she competed in the $250,000 Sapphire Grand Prix of Devon, among many other top jumper classes. Its first year back since a hiatus due to COVID-19, the Devon showgrounds were buzzing with excitement, as was Mavis, because it was her first time showing at Devon herself. Based out of California, Mavis doesn't make it to the East Coast often, but she found her way to Pennsylvania after qualifying for the Grand Prix of Devon. During our conversation, you'll hear the goings-on of the Devon Horse Show in the background, while Mavis tells a story of how she became interested in horses and how she thinks the close relationships with her mounts contributes to her success. Mavis also explains how she handles show nerves and how she's often starstruck when she's competing against athletes like McLean Ward, Eric Neve, and her former employer, Kent Farrington. Before we dive into the podcast with Mavis, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this week's episode, Bimeda, and share their message. Bimeda might be the biggest animal health company you've never heard of until now. Bimeda's products have been trusted by veterinarians and owners since the 1960s, when their Irish roots began. Bimeda is one of the largest producers of dewormers like Equimax, Bimectin, and Exodus. World-renowned equine athletes also rely on polyglycan, a patented formula that replaces lost or damaged synovial fluid, and Confidence X pheromone gel, which reduces and prevents equine stress. Consult your vet and visit bimedaus.com to see where to buy. Now, enjoy the episode with Mavis.
So, first of all, I just want to know what brought you here to Devon from the West Coast. Are you here just for this, or were you here already in the area?
We came out for the 2 weeks of Kentucky Spring last year. I brought 4 horses. I work for Georgie Master Sigismund at Whitethorn, which is out in Somas, California. So I came out last year and did the 2 weeks with a couple myself, and then she came out and saw it and really loved it. We haven't spent a ton of time back east, so this year we ended up coming out with a couple of clients, and the girls were all going to do Devon in the equitation, so it sort of worked out, hopefully that I'd be able to get into the 4-star and compete here this week, and luckily I was able to do that. So we've out, this is sort of the end of our back east tour for now. We'll go home on Sunday for a couple weeks and then come back out for Traverse City in July.
And this is your first time at Devon, right?
Yeah, I actually came out, my very first time was in 2009, right when I first started working for Kent Farrington. I came out for the night just to watch him show in this class, actually, and then we ended up going back. So I didn't really get to experience it or spend that much time here, so I would say this is, basically feels like my first time being here. And it's an incredible show. It's really nice having the crowd back. Obviously, it hasn't run for a couple of years. And just the atmosphere and environment is amazing. So it's definitely been really great.
And I was going to say, so was that your first time in the Dixon Oval riding yesterday?
Tuesday night, actually, was my first one,
Okay.
But, I think it's just so special. There are so many people here, a lot of locals who don't necessarily know a lot about the sport, a lot of people who do. The fair is great. I've sort of wandered around there during the day since we have classes at night. And it's just a really great experience, even seeing all the different breeds that are here and sort of different competitions and that sort of thing. I love that, so it's been really fun.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I've never seen half of the different classes that are going on here. It's so crazy. It's so cool.
Amazing to see how versatile horses can be,
And how many different disciplines there are that all these people are competing that I really probably didn't know about before.
Yeah,
so
or didn't consider, didn't think about, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to get to know a little bit of your background. You're from Los Angeles, right? The LA area. So how did you get into riding? Can you tell us that story?
I guess it's a little bit of like a cliche sounding story because I don't have, my aunt is a big horse person. She had Gallubay when he retired at her farm in Massachusetts. So he was actually the first horse I rode. She put me on him when I was like 2 in her courtyard and led me around, which in hindsight, putting, you know, a toddler on like a breeding stallion was maybe not the best choice, but she's an incredible horsewoman. But I think it was just something I always had an affinity for. Like I would make my parents stop when we were driving and there were horses in the field, on road trips, and it was my first word, and that sort of thing. So
horse was your first word?
Horse was my first word.
Oh, I love that.
So I don't really know sort of what really got me into it, but my parents told me I couldn't start taking lessons till I was 5, and I remember running into their bedroom on my 5th birthday and just being so excited because we were going to go and try a bunch of different stables sort of in the LA area, and see if I could find, you know, somewhere to start taking lessons.
So would you say your mom probably contributed the most to starting your interest in horses then?
Yeah, I think so. You know, she was always such a big, and it still is such a big supporter. When I was growing up, she was able to come to a lot of horse shows, and, you know, she'd run back to the barn and grab 6 different martingales if we needed a martingale because she didn't necessarily know which one we needed, you know.
Yeah.
But she was always super hands-on, very supportive. My dad also, I think it gives him a little bit more anxiety watching, but once I started doing the jumpers, he really started getting into it.
Yeah.
I think I was like 12, and he would come with his like capture the football team and like, you know, start rooting at the side of the ring like it was like some big sporting event. So it's definitely been, you know, sort of a family thing, which is really nice.
Yeah. And what has kept you involved in the sport for so long?
I don't think I ever thought I was going to do anything else. It's funny, you know, when you're in like kindergarten, sort of around that age, and people ask what you want to be when you grow up.
Yeah.
Some kids say they want to be a firefighter, or, you know, they want to be a superhero, and I always was like, I want to ride horses. And they all give you that same sort of look of being like, oh, that's so nice. And it's a little like condescending, like, you're doing great, you know, like follow your dream sort of thing. But I played a lot of different sports actually throughout, you know, middle school and high school. I played tennis on the junior tour. I played basketball up until the point where I started getting recruited, and I really needed to focus on sort of one sport.
Yeah.
And it never really was a question for me that I was going to, you know, try and ride full time and just do whatever I needed to do to be around horses.
Yeah. And who do you think has been a big mentor to you over the years?
Oh, God. Honestly, I rode with Meadowgrove growing up, which is a really, you know, big, wonderful barn in LA. And Dick Carvin, Susie Schroer, Nina Herrera, also when I first started with them, Francie Steinwood, Carvin. They were, I mean, the biggest part of my journey. I think at that age when I started with them, I was 10, and it was my first time sort of being in a bigger barn like that, and they really gave me such a solid foundation. You know, they made sure that we all were horsemen before anything else, and they're people that, you know, being back in California now, I still see them all the time at shows. If I ever needed anything throughout the years, I could call them. You know, they were the ones that set me up with Heritage for a working student, like, sort of situation, and then same thing, starting to work for Kent. And I think that they're, you know, always going to be in my lives, and they've always been super supportive of all of our careers from the kids that, you know, rode there growing up. And we all actually, for the most part, ride professionally now, which I think is pretty amazing. And we're all still super close. So I think they just created this, like, unbelievable environment that now, being older and looking back, I'm so appreciative of everything that they taught me, gave to me, you know, and helped me develop.
What's it like now competing against Kent?
So I'm trying to think if I have actually competed against him.
Or
I guess I have in Wellington and that sort of thing. Yeah. It's definitely, it's funny, you know, like I was second today in the ranking class to McLean, and I kind of was just like, I've been buzzing about it all day, you know, because all of these people, even though I like worked for Kent for a couple years, and Derek Henny and people like Lorenzo DeLuca, and just being around McLean and that sort of thing, I still get that little bit of like starstruck where I was walking the course the other night and he was in front of me and I was like, he was like, go, and I was like, no, you go first. I like kind of stood there and was like twiddling my thumbs, you know, so it's very surreal, I think, you know, even being around them, because I think for me, I learned so much, like even when I was grooming for the number of years, like being on the ground, being in the warm-up, being around it, you know, McLean's team, Kent's team, they have so many people and different moving parts, and to be able to learn from that, and now to be able to like compete against them and like feel like I'm sort of getting closer to that like level, you know, it's like a little mind-blowing still. Like,
I can
you're sitting there and I'm
imagine.
like pinching myself, you know, or like he's walking up to the ribbon and I'm behind him and Aaron Bale's behind me and I'm just like, oh my god, this is amazing, you know? So it's really cool.
Watching people like my age be up in the ranks with those riders, I look at them and I'm like, they must be absolutely like pinching themselves. Like if I was them and like looking around and being like, how am I surrounded by these people?
I'm like in the prize giving, walking around and Georgie's standing there on the rail taking pictures and I'm like, Michael, oh my god! And I'm like turning back around and trying to act like this isn't the biggest deal in riding career so far. But yeah, no, it's definitely, it's amazing, and I think it's something that I don't really see myself getting over, just because to me, you know, they're the riders that you grew up watching and learning from and having so much respect for and like idolizing, which like sounds silly, but I feel like a lot of people can relate to that.
Oh,
you know?
absolutely.
So it's really cool.
And you touched on it a little bit a few minutes ago. What do you think is your most, like your biggest accomplishment so far? I think you mentioned when you were in the ring with McLean.
I was going to say, yeah, this morning was pretty surreal. I was up in Sacramento jumping at the World Cup there a couple years ago, and I won the National Grand Prix ahead of Eric Neve, who's another one of, like, I mean, I just think he's incredible and such an unbelievable horseman. And I went in and laid down a round, and he was going in after me, and he just sort of gave me this look. And I was like, you know, so excited that I had done it, and he went in, and he was slower than I was. It was like a fraction, you know, but he came out and he just looked at me and was like, I don't know how you did that. And I literally was like, I don't even care if I win this class. It just meant so much, you know. And then same thing again, we were sort of riding around in the prize giving, and he was asking about my horse and, you know, saying how well I had ridden and how it was, you know, this, that, and the other. And I just was like, couldn't stop grinning. I drove home from that horse show that night and was just like so, you know, revved up on it sort of thing. And now it's nice because I see him, obviously he's out in California, so whenever I see him at shows, he sort of keeps up with my horses and we chat. And I think that to me, other than today was really great, but that to me stood out as like a moment that I will never forget. Just because I think, you know, again, he's so amazing and he's so accurate and so precise and so disciplined and all that. So to have him sort of compliment what I had done and then sort of carry on that relationship with him through the years was like, is very special.
That's something you carry with you.
Yeah, 100%. Every time I see him, I'm still there like, hi.
Yeah, right?
So.
Yeah. And like he said, I mean, you ride so beautifully, you ride so well. And I've noticed just like seeing pictures of you and watching you ride, you actually kind of almost have like a classical equitation position. Like your leg is always so beautiful. So where does that come from? What part of your training just, you know, not all jumpers have that like picture perfect equitation position, and you nail it. Like it's beautiful.
Thank you. I think, you know, honestly, being with Dick and Susie for so many years, I did do a lot of equitation growing up, because I think, again, you know, it's sort of the basis of sport in America. I think it's a really great stepping stone division for kids to have to be that accurate, think about their position. I think that you can influence so much about the horse with how you use your body or don't use it in a sense. And I've also been really fortunate, you know, I grew up riding a lot of sales horses for people and catch ride sort of thing. So I think being able to get as much ring time as I did doing that really helped me, like, you know, build up my skill set, if you will. It wasn't like I just had one horse and I was going on for one lesson a day. Like I was a working student for most of the years, so I would get to ride, you know, 8 to 12 horses a day and get lessons. And when I would go to the shows, I would be showing... Again, this was a sort of a different time, you know, but I'd have 8 to 10 horses I was showing each week for different people. And I think just being able to like put that time in and really work on it and have, again, trainers like Dick and Susie around who were constantly, not necessarily harping, but being like, you know, put your heel down further, you need to sit back more, like watching you in that sense, I think is, you know, very helpful. So yeah, I think that's probably a big part of it.
Yeah. And what is it about the jumpers that you just love so much? You've stuck to it, you're good at it.
You know, it's funny, I did my first Hunter Derby a couple months ago out in Thermal.
I think I saw you.
I was terrified. Like, I did the high performance the day before. My Wednesday classes got canceled because it was too windy. And so I did 2 high performance on Thursday and the Derby on Friday. And it was such a... I mean, I think it's an experience everyone should have because it makes you think so much about your pace, your balance, your control, where you're placing the horses. It all has to be so seamless. You want them to jump well out of this like lovely loping canter sort of thing, and I, having done the jumpers for so many years, am a little bit, for as good as my position is, I'm used to, in that moment, being able to do whatever it is to sort of get something done and not necessarily have to think about what it looks like. But for me, I transitioned over to the jumpers. I think I got my first children's jumper when I was 11, and honestly, a big part of it was my dad was so into it because he thought the hunter's equitation was like watching paint dry. So he would always come out to the shows and watch me when I did those classes because he loved the speed. He loved that it was, not super political. As far as that went, it was basically like you in the ring and you had to leave all the jumps up and go as fast as you could, you know. So for him, it was easy to understand where I won. And I think that definitely was something as a kid that I gravitated towards, But even now, like, I love doing the young horses. I like seeing them develop up. Like, I've had, Georgie is the first job sort of where I don't have to sell the horses that I have. Like, it's sort of my group of horses that we're building up, which is amazing. But I always liked, when one would be to a point where it would get sold and watching it go on with the new rider and that sort of thing. So I think it's just, for me, it's a lot less stressful than having to do something like the hunters, because you have that little bit of margin to be able to do something if you need to fix it. Where I suppose people would say in the hunters, you should have already done it. And I guess the jumpers is the same, but at least I don't feel bad if I have to like chop one more stride in at the last minute.
And you're not penalized for it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so.
And what about when you are showing? Do you ever get nervous? And if you do, how do you handle your nerves?
I'm the worst. I've gotten a lot better, actually, I would say, in the past probably 6 months. But I used to, like, not be able to breathe when I was going around. I'd come out and be, like, gasping for air. I tend to not think. I just would, like, sort of shut off. Like, Dick and Susie would be talking to me at the back gate, and I'd just have this, like, blank expression on my face, and they'd kind of snap and be like, are you paying attention? And I'd just look at them and look like a deer in the headlights.
I know that feeling.
And same thing, like my first actually left Saturday night I ever did, I hospitalized myself on Friday because I fainted. I like hadn't been eating, hadn't been drinking enough. It was like really hot in Florida. I was running around all day, and it was like 5 o'clock on Friday, and I was finishing up in quarantine, and I like passed out in the bathroom, hit my head on the sink, like ended up in the hospital. And the next day I came in and he was like, you look really pale, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, no, I'm fine. But like I couldn't really speak to anybody all day. I was like in this just like horrible, so in my head about it. And then I went in and jumped clear, which was like, I think the nice thing is for how nervous I would get, it always translated over into me not wanting to, let the horses down, embarrass the people that I knew believed in me and were there to support me, sort of thing. So it always, the more nervous I was, the better I tend to ride. But fortunately now I've sort of gotten to a place where I figured out like a routine for myself. I tend to 30 minutes before the class or so, I'll sort of take some time for myself. I like to watch videos that I know of rounds that went well on the horse that I'm going to be riding as sort of like a refresher or reminder. I think everyone has different ways they've learned to cope with it, but a lot of people used to tell me that it gets easier the more you do it, and I for years was like, there's no chance, because I was still getting so nervous. And now I think because I have a group of horses I know so well and Georgie is so wonderful and supportive, I've finally sort of settled into my anxiety, if you will.
And when a class, I mean, this whole sport is so unpredictable. Classes don't always go as we planned. So how do you deal with something like that? If you didn't do as well or if something happens in the ring, how do you work past something like that?
Well, Georgie will tell you I'm very hard on myself. I'm the first one that comes out and is like, always blames myself for something I could have done differently or better. And she's the first one again to give me a healthy dose of perspective, which is nice. Normally I give myself like 15-20 minutes to sort of stew, if you will, and like be in my head, and then I've sort of started getting myself out of it quicker and quicker. But I think the biggest thing is remembering that there's always another horse show, there's always another class. At the end of the day, if you come away and you're okay and the horse is okay, there are so many ways that you can sort of fix things if they do come up. But I think that's the biggest thing is, remembering there's always another class that you can go do, and that we're incredibly lucky to be able to do this in the first place. So again, I think perspective is key in those situations. When I first came out of the ring as a junior, I was always so nervous, and because I didn't breathe, they would let me sort of trot a couple of laps and cool down and like catch my breath, and then we would come talk about it. But I've definitely gotten I went through a phase of like getting worse about my stewing, and now I think I'm getting better about it. So it's
Good for
Georgie's
you.
always like, don't do that. You're doing great. It was just a da-da-da. And I'm like,
I
But
get it.
she gives me a little shake, and it's good having that.
So when you're back on the West Coast at home and you're training your horses, can you talk about some exercises that you like to do with them to keep them fit and keep them agile and fresh for when you do go off to shows?
Yeah, so we try and take normally 2 or 3 big breaks throughout the year, where they sort of get to let down. They'll just turn out for a couple of days, even if not maybe a week or 2 sort of thing, depending on our length of time between shows. But we're really lucky. We have 2 different arenas, jumping arenas, and then we have a grass field with a track around it. So normally after the shows, I like to take them out and keep them out of the arenas as much as possible. I'll go ride on the field, around the track, just sort of things to keep their wind and their fitness up.
Yeah.
We don't normally jump a lot at home because, again, normally when we're showing so much, it kind of, the home time is like the recovery period.
Yeah.
But we do a lot of like pole and cavaletti work. We'll set grids in one of the arenas, depending on what certain ones need to work on, sort of thing. But it's nice to have, the ability to sort of train in that respect, where like one ring maybe has a jumper course, one ring has an equitation course. Like I'll go jump around. We have a lot of walls and flowers and that sort of thing. So it's nice to let them see sort of different kinds of jumps, and just honestly try and keep them fresh and enjoying it. I think it's very easy to sort of go around and around in the same arena every day. And again, I understand that's something that some people, that's their circumstance sort of thing. But for me, I think it's really important to try and not do the same thing every day and keep it so that they're, once you get on, they're like excited to see what you're going to have them do today.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite exercise that you like to practice at home?
There's a lot you can do, with poles, with cavalettis, doing, sort of S lines where you do 6 and 7, 6 and 8, 8 and 6, 5 and 5, and sort of work on track and pace and that sort of thing. And I think that you can do that and keep your eye fresh and keep them thinking and work on their adjustability and stuff without putting the miles on having to jump them. So I would say I sort of do more of that at home than anything else. Like it's rare that we jump around a course bigger than 1.30 m at home. And same thing with my young ones, it's more about, I think so much of it is flat work based that, you can go for a week or 2 and sort of work on the basics and that sort of thing. And then you throw a course in front of her and she's like ready to go,
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we do it.
And just a few more questions to wrap up. And I ask this to a lot of riders I talk to, and I get all different answers, but why do you think that you have been so successful as a rider?
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I get that reaction a lot.
I think, the biggest thing for me at the end of the day, and I've always said this, if I could never horse show again, I would be fine with it because I do this because I love the horses. Like, I think the sport is a great part of it, but if all I could do was ride at home every day and make horses better and have that relationship with them, like, I would be so happy doing that. And I think that they know that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I spend a lot of time back in the barn. I've always been very hands-on, especially after grooming. And I think that having that sort of personal relationship with them means that when I ask for things from them in the ring, they're willing to give me that little bit extra. I think at the end of the day, it should be a partnership more than anything else. Like I could never imagine making them do something or forcing them into it, which is something that Georgie and I also have the same sort of viewpoint on. I think it's a companionship, a partnership, that sort of thing. So I think that, I walk into the barn and they all know, and like in the morning they all nicker and that sort of thing. And I don't know if it's just because I give them a lot of cookies, but it's nice. For me, it's about the relationship with them as opposed to being super competitive all the time.
And then what do you think is the hardest part of the sport for you personally?
I guess time-wise, as I've gotten older, you start to realize how much it takes to do this and how much you sort of end up missing out on if you really commit yourself to it. I think that it's something that maybe people take for granted because they see the 90 seconds in the arena, how much work goes into it. It's not a 9 to 5 thing. If you have a sick horse, you're there all night. If you want to go to a horse show like Devon, you're driving 46 hours to get there. And I definitely feel like over the years I've missed out on a lot of weddings and birthdays and that sort of thing. So I'm always like, I'm at a horse show or I have to do this. And, the nice thing now with Georgie is we have the ability to like set our schedule And then when we're home, have this time where I can go and see my parents for dinner on Sunday, and I'm very close to them now, distance-wise. So I can go, for a day off, I can go and spend 2 nights with them. Georgie, family is very important to her because she has a family as well. So like in a week, I'm going to my cousin's wedding for a couple days at our farm, and I'm going to get to see everyone where normally I would have said, even if I didn't have a show, I would have felt like I needed to be in the barn doing something. So I think it's really easy to get sort of caught up in everything and feel like you have to constantly be doing something in order to like be successful and get there. And I don't regret it at all. I think I learned so much from spending so much time in the barn and being around it. But I think now I've sort of found a balance, which I think is rare but really important to me at this point.
And then one more question. So you have like a huge social media following and like presence. How do you think that happened? Like,
I honestly have no idea. It's funny. I really don't fully understand how Instagram works. My friend Bethany Unwin helps me a lot with my social media. Like she'll do, video editing for me and give me ideas of things to put out there. I definitely go through slumps where I just am like out living life rather than sort of being on the gram. But I think also it's a nice place to, so much of it is sunshine and roses and the best parts of everyone sort of thing. And I think that it's very unrealistic to have that. So I get a lot of messages from people being like, it's nice to see how real you are and the fact that you can sort of laugh at yourself and joke and like be relatable. And for me, I have a lot of people that ask if I have someone that runs my Instagram, which I don't. I do it all myself, for better or for worse. But I sort of try and respond to everyone. Like I have a lot of people. I have a couple people that I've met here that we chat all the time on there, but we've never met, sort of thing. And they came up and it's like, oh, I'm, Shelby, and we talk and this and that. So it's been really interesting seeing, the people I've connected with and stuff. But I have no idea why I have as many people that follow me as I do.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode with Mavis Spencer, and a big thank you to the sponsor of this week's episode, Bimeda. Learn more at bimedaus.com. You can subscribe to the Practical Horseman podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. While you're there, please rate and review the show. Also, tune into our mini-sode series, The FOD Pod, which is released every other Sunday. You'll hear audio lessons from our favorite Practical Horseman on-demand clips. At Practical Horseman On Demand, you can enjoy hundreds of how-to videos and get insider access to exclusive interviews and lectures, slow-motion demonstrations, and step-by-step tutorials taught by top-level pros in the hunter, jumper, equitation, and eventing disciplines. When you tune into the FOD Pod, listen closely for a promo code for 15% off your Practical Horseman On Demand subscription. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode. I'm Julia Murphy, and you've been listening to the Practical Horseman podcast.